everybody, to today's session. We got Zack Hamilton, CX consultant coach, joining us. We're going to be talking about fluff to flow, and Zack's got a little bit of an angle to him. We were just talking about this pre-show a little bit. There's some language that often are used in some of his interesting and pushy, I think, kind of talk track on all things CX, which we'll talk about in just a second. But today our topic is uneffing CX in the age of acceleration. Zack, thanks for joining, man. How are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and this kind of in-your-face type CX movement you're pushing.
Yeah, what's up, Gabe? I appreciate you taking the time to have this chat. I mean, look, a little bit about me. If you look at the span of my 21-year career, I spent the first 15 years in retail. So I was the customer experience practitioner, all the way from I was a store manager to multi-unit leader to VP of store operations, helped build the first fully transactional rent-to-own website.
Okay.
And then ultimately, customer experience just fell in my lap. So the CEO was like, "Look, I know we have an NPS score, but I don't know anything about it. I don't even know how to calculate it. Quite frankly, I have no insights. Can you just figure this out for me?" And quite frankly, Gabe, like I didn't realize I was doing CX out in the field, right? When I was a P&L owner, I got a percentage of my store's profit. I got a percentage of my region's profit. And so ultimately, I was always looking at customer feedback to figure out how could we create a better experience in my own store or our stores, because I wanted to increase my quarterly bonus. I wanted to increase my profit so I could have a bigger bonus. And ultimately, that led to leading our customer and employee experience strategy. My team was responsible for rolling out all of our strategic initiatives to our customers.
Oh.
So smartphone launch to a new premier loyalty membership to digital payments. And if you think about digital payments, we're all like, hey, that's pretty simple today. But if you think about your traditional rent-to-own customer who's financially strapped, some of them don't even have banking accounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, 74% of the Aaron's business now is all digital payments. So excited about that.
Wow.
And then I made the shift. So then I got bored with one brand. So I jumped over to Medallia, led the retail strategy there for Medallia, went over to Forsta, and then ended up at Parcel Lab. And I think about kind of that full post-purchase experience.
Yeah, wow.
And ultimately, Gabe, when I think about kind of my role in tech the last almost 8 years now, I've really kind of put that customer-centric go-to-market strategy in place. So I've led a lot of go-to-market strategy. I ended up leading sales enablement as well.
Yep.
So teaching sellers how to buy or sell to buyers like me, when I was probably not the best buyer of software. And then quite frankly, just to be honest, I started this uneffing your CX newsletter back in September. And it's really gained traction. And part of it, Gabe, has just really been around, I get tired of scrolling LinkedIn and seeing the same crap. And so this is kind of that alter ego punch in the face, call out to our discipline and to CX practitioners of, if you don't do something different, you're going to be the next one that's cost rationalized out of the business.
Look, I think I love that last, part there, because I think our space often, I don't know, there's just a lot of empathy. And so sometimes with empathy, there's mediocrity, or you just kind of stay in the same place and you kind of all do the same fluffy stuff we do in CX and stuff like that. And so, but the world is obviously changing and you got to wake up and smell the roses. And if not, you might be cost reduced out of the business. And so sometimes you need someone to, I got a 13-year-old boy, and every once in a while to get him out of bed, you got to shake him a little bit. So sometimes I think that's part of the game you have to play. I like it. I like it. And if you haven't checked out the newsletter, do. I think it's got that tone and voice that's a little more real. It's, wake up. We got to kind of get cracking, or you might be facing some different challenges. So anyways, appreciate the quick overview. Want to see if I can steal some secrets from you in our short time here. You mention often when you talk about this idea of like CX not delivering impact, and you talk about seeing decks full of NPS scores instead of actual results. I think this is a little bit to some of that, wake up and smell the roses type action you're talking about. But what's behind that impetus?
Yeah, look, again, and I think a lot of people misinterpret. I spend a lot of my time helping to really educate and enable the practitioner to speak the language of executive team, right? They
Yeah.
don't speak customer, voice of customer NPS, they speak P&L. And ultimately, it just goes back to, that first real conversation I had with our CEO where he's like, look, I know we have an NPS score. I don't know any of the drivers behind it. I don't see any
Yeah.
customer feedback. And so I felt really confident walking into my first executive readout where I walked in with a bunch of PowerPoints of NPS and CSAT, and I could, give you everything of here's all of this, value, the drivers of NPS, negative, positive sentiment analysis. And I'll never forget my CEO, and we all see this, they have amnesia. And he goes, so what? Like, this is great, but I don't know what any of this means.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the big wake up call
Mm,
where if we really think about traditional experience management, I mean, it's what, 20, 25 years old now, right? When Bain really introduced the concept of net promoter, and it's actually, it was a system, not just a score.
yeah.
And ultimately the promise was if you increase your overall NPS score, then Mr. or Mrs. CEO, you're going to see increases in same store sales revenue. Your customer base is going to grow,
Yeah, that's
your
right. That's
advocacy.
right.
And ultimately, the CX leader or the CEOs, they bought into it, right, Gabe? Like they funded teams, they
Yeah.
funded software,
That's a
uh,
big movement. Yeah, that was
they
big, right?
funded a lot. And then ultimately, not only just my time at Aaron's, but when I made the shift over to Medallia, there were so many not just executives, but CEOs who I'd have conversations with where they're like, I don't know the business impact of what this is delivering. Like, I know what I'm paying. I see that on my P&L every
But it's
quarter, every
not.
year. And so ultimately, CEOs bought in, but we've never delivered for them. But to
Yeah.
your point, we started to, we were selling, emotion over execution. So
Mm,
we focused a lot on feelings instead of the frictions that our customers were having.
yeah.
Um, and quite frankly, like the business needs impact. I mean, we have CEOs out here fighting quarter to quarter to keep their roles and their jobs.
Yeah.
And we have CX practitioners who are continuously selling this 12, 18, 24-month transformation.
Yeah.
And the CEO doesn't even know if they're around that long. And
Yeah.
so ultimately, a lot of this movement is how do we connect the dots between what our customers are telling us and the impact it's having on the P&L? And if there's any CX practitioner, if you ask them, hey, what do you do? If they say anything other than I'm going to help you grow your business, reduce your customer churn, drive operational efficiencies, and protect your blind spots from compliance, run from them.
No, I love it. I mean, that's kind of an executive view that ties to what the business needs, not what the CX team needs. I think
Yeah.
that's so hard to make that jump in talk track, in meetings, in communication. I appreciate the push. I love that. I think that's super important. Want to kind of throw a couple things out for you here. One of the things that I think you find and talk about a lot is this idea of burnout. So why do you feel like so many CX teams are exhausted? What do you think needs to change to have companies move from the feedback concept to the action concept?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to burning out and why so many practitioners are exhausted is ultimately when we join the organization, I think everyone, no matter what role you're in, you want to join the organization and make a significant impact.
Yeah.
You want to know that the work that you're doing is really having a major contribution.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, and I'm no different, right? As a CX practitioner and leader, and even over on the SaaS side of the house,
Yeah.
where I spend a lot of my time is kind of that executive practitioner helping them with their strategy. I want to make sure that I'm making an impact with every
Yeah.
brand that I work with. Um, and so ultimately, when you really think about kind of the CX strategies out there today, it's just this huge loop of continuous listening.
Yeah.
right? So we have surveys for surveys. And then we have the survey to follow up on how that survey experience was. And so we're collecting a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think we do a really nice job of, updating the business on here are the issues, right? Here's what our customers are screaming about the loudest. But ultimately, what happens is no one takes action on it. And one of the reasons why no one takes action on it is this traditional experience management and the outer loop, which I just dropped a newsletter on today.
Hmm.
It's a waterfall approach, right? It's this traditional waterfall approach where you go into this, governance council and you make your pitch, and then someone decides if we're going to prioritize it or not.
Yeah.
And ultimately, businesses have shifted to this more agile approach, right?
Yeah.
Because consumer behavior is not slowing down; it's only accelerated.
Yeah.
And so the business has to be able to move as fast, if not faster than the customer. And so what happens is the burnout really comes from this lack of impact, where I'm reporting out on the same customer frictions quarter after quarter because
It's just not.
they're not getting prioritized. And the reason why they're not getting prioritized, it's not because the CEO doesn't care. The CEO cares, but the CEO has 10, 15 other business frictions that need to get prioritized. And
Right.
other people are coming to the table saying, here's the friction. If we move it by 0.25%, we can see this lift in revenue. And so
Yeah.
they're coming and tying it to the P&L where CX leaders aren't. And I think the other piece is what CX practitioners don't understand is we don't own that friction getting solved.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
influence the friction getting solved. And so we have to work cross-functionally with our peers to make them want to solve that, where they actually know that in order for me to hit my own KPIs or metrics or targets that I'm held accountable to, I have to solve this friction. I have to champion that. It can't just be the CX practitioner. So I think that's where a lot of the burnout is coming from, is just the lack of impact.
Yeah, man.
And it just becomes this simple shift of being able to truly frame up that friction in terms of P&L impact,
Yeah.
and really creating that urgency and that sense of, well, what happens if I don't prioritize this? What's the cost of inaction? And then how do you go influence your cross-functional peers?
Yeah, look, I think, yeah, when you get stuck in it's not the mud, but I like that word, like every quarter just doing the same thing, reporting the same thing, and you're not able to see that impact. It does start to get just drudgery. It's just the same old, same old. So I think it does. It ties back a lot to some of those messages. You often talk about ditching this idea of the waterfall CX and moving to something that's more agile or kind of action based. What is that? How do you feel like that really impacts or should impact the CX world?
Yeah, I learned this when I was back at Aaron's. One of the things that I took notice of internally within the organization, as the company was really changing Aaron's.com from an on-site, an online catalog to a transactional website.
Yep.
The VP of e-commerce and our CIO, John Trainer, they had these agile sprints, right? They build essentially these action pods is essentially what I call them.
Yeah.
And they were running in these, probably most of them were running in like this 2-week cycle. Some of them were maybe a month cycle. And so ultimately, every quarter there was a prioritization session. The CEO and the exec team were part of it. And they would do a couple things. One, a readout of, here's all the actions that we did take based on the data that they were getting of that customer journey. And here is the impact so far. And then ultimately, here's a list of everything that's happening in the business. We have to drive justification or prioritization.
Yeah.
And as I started to sit back and really think about it, well, where was all the investment going, Gabe? It was going all to e-commerce and technology, right? Because
sure.
they were truly laying up the business impact. And so ultimately, I had to shift the way that I approached customer experience at Aaron's and really start to feed this agile engine versus trying to create my own separate CX governance and then drive this waterfall approach.
Sure.
And so ultimately, when I think about, CX, it really should be the system in which the way your organization operates. And
I like that.
most brands are operating now very, very agile. And so when I think about kind of this experience performance system, one means you have to shift from sponsorship to ownership.
Yeah.
So we were told as practitioners, if you want CX to succeed within your organization, you have to get sponsorship. And
Yeah.
every CEO sponsored, and they showed up to the kickoff meetings and they would make an email, but no one truly owned
An
the
email that you wrote, probably. Right?
oh yeah, I would draft it. And so no one really owned the outcomes. And so ultimately, Gabe, if we want to really drive this experience performance system, it's think about here's the frictions. Now you quantify it through business impact. You get prioritization, and now you build those small kind of action pods cross functionally. Who's responsible for not an increase in NPS, but it's an improvement over whatever business outcome that is. So think about that as increasing AOV, increasing customer lifetime value, reducing cost to serve, reducing customer churn. Pick whatever is one of your strategic priorities. But ultimately, what we need less of is committees and more around these agile action pods
Yeah.
that are delivering small wins every 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. Look, I think that pod system. I have to double click on that. Really think that could be a powerful idea as companies think through this. Maybe just two questions before I let you go here. One, just man, AI is everywhere. You're around this. It's obviously a shiny object. Some people don't know what to do. Some people do know what to do. How are you coaching companies and organizations to think about this kind of wave of AI that's hit us right in the face, whether you like it or not?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited and optimistic about um, about AI and essentially what it can help organizations do. I mean, if you really think about consumer behavior, right? It's only accelerating, it's not slowing down. And so if you think about how brands operate, especially with customer experience, by the time you start to take action, consumer behavior is already shifted, it's already changed, right? Yeah. And so ultimately how I'm coaching around or helping brands strategically think about AI is one, you can't just apply AI to everything, because if your system is a mess right now, the only thing that AI is going to do is amplify the mess.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, it's really around kind of this test and learn of pick one strategic initiative or one strategic KPI. So maybe that is, hey, right now we see customer churn significantly increasing.
Yeah.
Well, think about the business problem. What is it that we're solving? And then where can AI or automation accelerate reducing those specific frictions that are causing customer churn? And so it's not because if you go all in on this AI approach, you also have to think about internally with your teams, do they have the right skill sets? Do you have the right capabilities within your organization? And there's going to be a lot of upskilling that needs to take place. So start small and then solve just one, continuously monitor, improve, the agent, for example, and then pick up your second one. And the other way that I think about this, Gabe, is AI should really free us as humans, our human kind of capacity to solve the higher value problems within our organization, not to replace thoughtful design and action, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the other piece of advice that I've been giving is don't let the vendors write your roadmap for you.
Interesting.
Let the business impact define where AI fits in.
Yeah.
And then continuously grow with it. I think that's going to be the key.
Yeah. I think the partnership mentality is better than like it can come in and just do everything and we just let it run its course. I've never seen a system, sometimes we've done this in the past, it's like, oh, if I just get this tool or this system, it'll solve my personalization problem or my retention problem. It's like, no, that's never happened. It's finding what you need, where is the gap you have, how can you plug it with that and then build something around it. So I like that framing of kind of look at it more as a partnership rather than like a replacement or something. That's going to be an interesting one, man. Fun topic, hit a bunch of different stuff. Well, if you anything you'd leave? We got a bunch of CX leaders here, a bunch of
Yeah.
people trying to figure this out. What would be kind of the summary or thing you'd leave with the audience as we wrap here?
I think if I could just give one kind of player tip, leaving the audience, it's really become a business partner.
Yeah.
Too often as a CX practitioner, and I felt, and look, I did this as well, is I tried to continuously push CX onto the business
Yeah.
and then wonder why my cross-functional colleagues really didn't care about it. And it was more about, how do I become your cross-functional partner? Understand, here's the 3 to 5 KPIs that I'm held accountable to this year, as let's make an example as the VP of e-commerce. And now, how can I help the VP of e-commerce really understand what are those specific customer frictions?
Yeah.
What's the right thing that I'm working on?
Yeah.
And so it really becomes her idea or his idea to solving those specific frictions, because they can see how meaningful those frictions are having on the e-commerce business.
Totally.
And so that would be my one player tip, is become a business partner.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think that's, a lot of us don't see that. We need to. I think once you get there, it really opens up and changes a lot. So I think that's a great takeaway, great leave behind. Okay. Well, great talk track. Zack, fun to kind of chat with the overall CX story. Newsletter, if you haven't checked it out, to do it, we'll make sure we link up to that. But for the rest of the audience, enjoy the rest of the sessions and have a fantastic day.